We've added Jim Connell was president of a publicly traded company. Mr. Quarterly Report, as I call him. But on the healthcare side, he has a faction. He was specialized in manufacturing, and BAS was able, who's a third-party administrator, able to convince him to come on board and lead that company for change in healthcare. So I've asked Jim to set up here as well, and if there's any manufacturing questions or tough questions you want particular asked to Jim, we'll get it over to him. So, first question. I know you got them. We just threw a lot of stuff at you. Anybody? Yeah. Right.
What is the look-back period? Would it be 12 months? Is that shorter?
If you're talking about the look-back period for determining whether you're a large employer, it's the prior calendar year.
What about full-time equivalents? We have seasonal people and large part-time staff. So what is the look-back period to determine whether or not you're a full-time equivalent?
Well, if you're at the individual employee level, you've got some discretion as to what your look-back period might be. It can't exceed more than 12 months.
Anywhere between 3 months and 12.
Yeah, but you can, there's a whole process that neither Greg nor I talked about for determine when you have variable hour employees as to when they become full-time employees, and there's, you can either do it on a month-by-month, basis, or you can put procedures in where you can say, we'll look back at a period of up to 12 months, and say, okay, over the course of that look-back period, they've worked enough hours to be full-time employees, and then we're going to have an administration period where we're going to make them an offer of coverage, and then that's followed by a stability period. I'm sorry for making everyone's eyes glaze over when I talk about this stuff, but where they are then entitled to keep coverage for the remainder of that stability period. So, for example, a pretty common arrangement, I think, might be for a look-back period that might end, let's say, October 15th every year, administration period through the end of the year, and then a stability period of the following calendar year, where once you've offered them coverage, they continue to be eligible for coverage even if they become a less than full-time employee in that following period. It's an approach that if you have a lot of variable hours of employees that you might want to consider. When you put it down on paper and put systems around it, it's maybe less complex than it just sounded. But it seemed like it can be a workable solution. I'm working with someone in Michigan with a large variable employee population, and we're starting to get our arms around that issue with them, and I think it will work.
Thank you, Bill.
Greg, anything more on that?
Question right down here. Let's put the microphone so everybody can hear what the question is. There we go.
Do we know yet how the exchange is going to work in Ohio and how it might work in other states also?
The governor decided that we will not have an exchange in Ohio, so the federal government is going to operate it, just like it's going to operate the exchanges in about 30 of the 50 states. I'm not sure my math is exactly right, but that's about right. And the federal government has not yet set up exactly what that exchange is going to look like. We will know before October the 1st what that exchange will look like. And it's going to depend state by state what insurers are going to offer policies that the federal government will certify as available on the exchange. But there will be, I suspect in August and September, be a tremendous amount of press coverage about what options are available for people in Ohio. Perhaps a bigger issue in the state of Ohio is whether or not to extend Medicaid coverage. As part of the ACA was intended to cover Medicaid in every state, and require the states to extend Medicaid coverage to the poor. The one part of the Supreme Court decision that found that to be unconstitutional was the requirement that states offer Medicaid coverage. About 23 or 4 states, including the state of Kentucky, have extended Medicaid eligibility to very poor people, but as of the moment, Ohio has not. The carrot that the federal government is offering is that for 3 years it will pay 100% of the Medicaid expansion, and thereafter it will cover 90%, and to try to get the states to enter into this. But Florida, Texas, Ohio, the predictable states have not accepted that opportunity yet.
Some governors thought it was more of a bait and switch than a carrot, because at some point the state has to pick up the whole cost.
Right.
So,
Right now, Medicaid is, if it's not the biggest line item in state budgets, it's close to the biggest line item in state budgets, and the concern is that's just going to exacerbate that problem.
Thank you. Question? Oh, I'm sure there's got to be more questions.
I just have an observation, especially in the last speaker, well, my eyeballs have rolled back in my head. It started pretty early today, and that's why we have an HR director, so she knows all that. But I think it was really interesting to take a step back and look at the more proactive things that we could do. We've sort of been dancing around wellness, and several of us are now eating vegetables for lunch and snacks, and apples for treats. And we don't have birthday cakes anymore. We have fresh fruit for our parties. And so it was really interesting to see the sense that with a little more aggressiveness with that you really do feel that we could greatly influence the cost of our insurance. We're spending $400,000+ a year on our health insurance. And I think for us, maybe the bigger challenge is that we've been very kind to our employees. We essentially paid 100% of the employees' health insurance until I think Mr. Obama said we couldn't do that. So now they pay like $10 or $20 per paycheck for that, for their coverage. So one of our dilemmas is really going to be, it may be fine that the rule is 9.5% of their W-2 for that employee, and understanding that sure, we can whop their paycheck for the spouse or the children, but that doesn't make their lives any easier. So really our bigger challenge is to figure out how to reduce the cost of the coverage so that, we love our employees and we want them happy. We don't want them looking for another job or struggling. And I think that's really a bigger challenge. So it's great that there's these options to reduce the cost, but that's not a kindness to our employee. So we're really looking for ways to make it more livable for them.
one thing to follow up on your observation is that, it's important to not forget that, when you're providing health care coverage to your employees, it's very tax-efficient compensation. It's tax-efficient for the employee, it's tax-efficient for the employer, and that you're not responsible for FICA taxes on that. And, people get wrapped up on a lot of different things, and sometimes the initial analysis kind of forgets that, well, yeah, if you push everyone to the exchange, well, then they're buying that with after-tax coverage unless they get subsidies, and it's going to push your wages up eventually because you're going to have to pay them more, and then you're going to pay FICA tax on it. So, a lot of knee-jerk reactions, oh, we'll just drop coverage, are long-term mistakes.
If I may, just a comment on your observation. I've only been in the healthcare business now about 2.5 years. I came from the manufacturing side. And this industry of healthcare makes it far more complex than it actually is. I think it's maybe self-serving and there's a benefit to do that. But if you get, it's basic blocking and tackling. It's no different than any other aspect of the business, whether you're in a manufacturing business, a service-related business, or what have you. First of all, you got to have information. You can't manage. You don't take a capital project, say you're in manufacturing, you don't spend $2 million on a piece of equipment without doing some type of ROI adjustment and payback period. You got to think about healthcare the same way. It's gone from probably, in my old business, we were $45 million. First year I joined, I was with the company 9 years. And our healthcare as percent of sales is 4%. when I left, we grew the business. We doubled the size of the business to 90 million, and it was 8%. You're eating your young. You're eating your profit margin. So owners, C-suite people have to do something about this. It is either the second or third largest line item. And think about it this way. We live in a sick care society. We go to the doctor only when we need to go to the doctor. If you have a piece of equipment, you do annual maintenance on it. We don't do annual maintenance ourselves. And gentlemen, I hate to say this to you, but I think you already know it. Women are much smarter than men. They at least have a doctor, and they go to the doctor. You look at probably 90% of the men in this room who are 45 and older don't have a personal physician. How can you deal with yourself? It's like that machine that you want to have make widgets for you. So you just got to, if you get the facts, you think about it in a proactive way, and because of health, because of the government allows 20%, now 30% contribution differential, you basically have your sick people pay for your wellness programs. So I don't mean editorializing, but in many ways it's a lot simpler than you think, and there are solutions. And the ACA or Obamacare, it's here, it's going to stay, like it or not, but we got to get through this hurdle in 2014. But as business owners, and I'm now one of those out of the public company world, you got to start thinking then about 85% of your costs are tied up in your claims. And 75% of your claims with proactive activity could have been eliminated.
If I can make a quick comment as well, I'm sorry before the question, is that the wellness strategy that's being utilized by the program, the Acticare program with IHS, with Brett back there, has an endorsement from the American Hospital Association, an exclusive endorsement. So the American Hospital Association has, I guess, suggested that the best plan in the marketplace for wellness that they can endorse exclusively is the IHS program, which has been around for about 19 years, has about 1,400 employers nationally that participate, and with their health index scoring, it allows employers and employees to be more accountable. If we have a speeding ticket, we pay more for our car insurance, and with this particular program, when people go through it and they are identified, and 81% of people, I guess, achieve their goals, and maybe 20% of people just ignore it, then should they be accountable or should they not?
Thank you, Dennis. Question in the back here? We'll get you the mic. Hang on a minute. Okay, go ahead.
So what do you, like when you're talking about, I don't need it, when you're talking about the wellness stuff, what do you allow to mandate? Like, can you mandate somebody has to get annual blood work? Can you say that? I mean,
Well, it's not a matter of mandate. You make it part of the plan requirements, in plan entry.
in your plan?
Absolutely.
You're allowed to say?
Absolutely.
In our company, it's a condition of eligibility. You have to have biometric health evaluations if you want to be on the health plan. Now, some employers think that's too draconian, so then you just say if you don't take a biometric health evaluation, then you automatically pay a higher contribution. So that currently that 20%. But it depends on how much you value human capital and what kind of company culture you have.
Well, because you're right, because you're going to give people, men over the age of 50, they have to do a doctor in 10 years. And suddenly you're going to tell them, in order to stay on the plan, you have to do your screening. And they're going to say, you're getting them on this. Honestly.
Getting in my pocketbook,
No,
actually.
I agree with what you're saying.
Hang on, we have a question over here.
My question is along the same lines as this gentleman over here is, as business owners, I guess the biggest question here is that most of us probably don't understand what the boundaries are of what we're allowed to do with employees, and it goes from the legal standpoint of, like you brought up with all the HIPAA laws, and I think what makes this even cloudier is what we're allowed to know and what we're allowed to ask, and because when you go to the doctor, sometimes you can barely ask what happened to your spouse. So how can we even, as employers, be expected to know all these things about our employers, and which kind of goes back to what my original question I was going to ask is, depending on what level of business you're in, when, when you've got employees who of varying abilities that are difficult to manage for the tasks that you want them to do for your company, then how do you get into another level now where you're going to throw the management of their lifestyle on top of trying to manage them as employees all combined in one? Because the employees of, we own a garden center and landscape company, and to be honest with you, the pool that you're fishing in to get those employees isn't the greatest in the world in terms of the way they live their lifestyle. And it's very difficult.
Yep. There are others in your industry who have, in answer to your question, who have been able to bridge the gap. They have a very high level of mix of people, and some non-English speaking, and they've achieved success. But the greatest deterrent there is to theft around a building is to put up a sign that says, "We have a camera," right? And anybody that sells surveillance services will tell you that that's the start of it. And you could probably do that for $10, and instead of buying thousands and thousands of dollars of surveillance equipment. But in this field and in helping behavior changes, it's an evolution, not a revolution. And when employees know, and this is part of education of awareness, when they know they can be empowered to change outcomes of the future and costs, they have a whole new ear for listening. But they haven't believed it because in the past they've been nailed and changed, and if you think about how jaded they can become from knowledge of over the last 3 years and changes that have happened, it's very difficult. Do you have a question?
How can you penalize? Because we use Humana as our healthcare provider, and they've got a great program called Humana Vitality, where you go in there and you do all these things that you're talking about. We got to take our employees, get me a screen to the computer screen, just to get them to take that first step. So from a, maybe this is a question for the attorney, from a legal standpoint, that's how you got to work with employees. If you don't do this, this is going to happen. If you say you don't go to the Humana website and fill this out, because we explained to them, it was a meeting, actually at the company Christmas party, we explained to them this is a team effort that we want everybody to do, and if everybody does it, and everybody makes themselves healthier, it's Humana talking all those we're going to work with our rates. It is the number one thing everybody complains about. How much of their money gets taken out for their paycheck every week. But that's all fine until they actually have to show up and actually do something about it. And that's the problem. So what, from a legal standpoint, can you say if you've got 20 employees and 15 of them are doing everything you want, what do you do to those 5 that just refuse to do it?
Well, they don't get the wellness incentives, obviously.
And what are the incentives? Is that like you give them bonuses to people that do it? I mean, like what, is an example?
Let me try to answer your question a little bit. There's information really in two sorts, I think, your question. What can you do currently from a governmental viewpoint in ACA, and then what do you do really? You got to get some other information. We have 140 employees at our company, of which about 111 are on the plan. As I said earlier, for our wellness program, biometric screenings is a condition of eligibility. We sat down 2 years ago, and we're self-funded, obviously, and our healthcare costs have gone up over $300,000 on a year-over-year basis. We sat down in an employee meeting with our employees and told them that, and said, that's our current reality. And oh, by the way, I think every one of you are going to have a birthday next year. And as you get older, the possibility of having claims only increases. So that may not work at your company and your culture, but we basically opened up the books and said, okay, this is what the cost, how it's increased, and we've got to take some drastic action. We went to a smoke-free campus. We said that we're going to start changing premiums, and if you didn't pass an acceptable grade, you're going to pay a higher contribution, which this year is 20% greater. And next year it'll be 30%. So it was a lot of excessive communication. Now that may work at one location, it may not work at the other location.
But from a legal standpoint, you could say, if you don't have this type of result on a blood test, you're gonna contribute more to your premium. Or if you're a smoker, you're gonna contribute more to your premium. You can legally do that.
We're doing it. I'll let Greg answer the question. I'm not the lawyer.
The standard lawyer answer, of course, is it depends, but generally, yes. But, you know, as with anything else, there's exceptions. That you can require people to be smoke-free, but there has to be an exception for those who continue to smoke. You have to offer smoking cessation programs, and as long as they participate in the smoking cessation programs and they smoke, then they don't necessarily get penalized. And but you know, wellness programs are carrots and sticks, depending on how one looks at it. And yes, you can do that.
I think, Greg, isn't an ACA, there's actually language that talks about the ability to do that, and 30% next year differential, and if you offer, a smoking cessation, it can go to 50%, am I correct?
Yeah, I believe that's right. And
So there's actual language.
The regs are just, some came out this week and some came out, I guess it was Friday, wasn't it?
Right.
On the wellness
Friday.
incentives. And the others came out about a month ago.
Going back to the general theme, which is we're asking, we're blurring that HIPAA line, because we're saying you have to, we call it fitness for duty, and we're expecting our people to be able to have certain, ability to lift 50 pounds for manufacturer, certain benchmarks. We don't really know what happens specifically if they can't do it, what rights do we have? The same thing if we say that they have to have certain blood levels in order to do that. How are we allowed to know that?
Well, you get information, and it says either pass or fail, but there's some caveats, and Greg talked about it depends. If you have a predetermined problem, you get a note from your doctor, you automatically pay the lower contribution, even though you did not pass the test. You also, if you have roughly 60% improvement on a year-over-year basis, then you can get the lower contribution. So there's ways to work that in. What you don't want to do is get your employees fired up, and then they find they get the test, and they say, God, I don't know how I can pass, ever. Well, you don't want to turn them off because you want to live in a world of continuous improvement. So you want to offer that 60%, continue to offer that opportunity for them to get the lower contribution. I hate to say it to you, but this is not a spectator sport. You're gonna have to get in the game in a collaborative way, as Steve talked about, to move this cost needle. And the gentleman's comment, you got to have information. You got to have information of what ACA, what you can and cannot do, which the panel, I think, did a good job of trying to explain. But you also have to have your information. Do you know that, I told you earlier, 85% of your costs are claims. 15% of your employees make up 85% of the cost. Oh, by the way, 50% of your costs are by about 3% of your employees. And, oh, by the way, next year, there'll be a different 15% representing 85% of your claims cost.
Right.
So until you have that level of information, it's hard for you to manage. So you got to have the DOL type of information, but you also have to have, in a HIPAA-compliant environment, the information on your employees so you can put together the right plan design and the right strategies. And the key word is strategies, because you're only going to tackle this program and successfully if you think about it as a strategy rather than an expenditure.
One more question.
You're doing good. No, don't.
Right.
My past history where this is just all confusing to me, we got a small company, usually around 15 full-time employees. When we meet with the health insurance provider, and like everybody else, like you guys explained, how the rates go up every year. The guy, the representative from the healthcare company would say, well, your claims went up X amount because you had 3 major claims this year. I think that's what can affect like small companies. But he's not allowed to tell us who it was, how much it was,
Right.
what it was for, any information. It's just you had 3 major claims, therefore your insurance is blowing up. But you guys seem to do things that conflict with that a little bit, because you can kind of single out the bad eggs and say, okay, we need you to straighten up. So that everybody, which I agree with 100%, but my past history in dealing with the insurance company conflicts with that.
That's just the difference between being fully insured and self-funded.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing is that something that's been developing, and BAS is behind it a lot, is they've started collecting people together that have the same values, that have decided they're going to really help their employees make better choices, provide better care for them, because they give them information early, right? And they've been able to coagulate companies into a captive. And a captive is where basically you take self-insurance and they're sharing the same philosophy. And they are cutting costs like crazy. Why? Well, because if you get people together that all have the same goals in mind, and they know that the way to get at it is to help people help themselves, what's happening is that their outcomes and costs are being shared in a group with the same mentality, same outlooks, and they're cutting costs. And so it starts with one gets two gets four gets eight, and the next thing you know, you're changing healthcare in America. And that's what's really, got a question?
I have a quick question.
Oh, hi, Doc.
Hey, I'm actually, what your issue there is very common. I'm a solo practice family doc in Cincinnati. And 20 years ago, there was a group, Choice Care, and they came to town. They were here, and they changed it. Now, one of the issues that you're talking about, Vitality, couldn't give you data, couldn't give you the information. And I also would say they're not helping you anyway. So what excites me, and you're a smaller group, but is the opportunity for going to a self-insured platform for many, because then you can innovate. So Anthem talks about on Inquirer a couple days ago, they're going to do telemedicine, have docs from California and Boston help your employees. I say, what about us docs locally? You know, why don't you pay us locally to do this? Healthcare is local, let's figure this out. The insured carriers aren't so interested in that, but I know the employers are. What I know is employers and physicians and providers are all in this together. And if you can construct a system that reinforces that, i.e. a healthy employee has access to their personal physician, coach, you name it, we all win. So I think this is what I think is very exciting, the opportunity that's coming up. And what I really want to ask is, what are the limits for the self-insured employers over the traditional in light of the ACA? Because all of us in the room are going, anxiety. This is high anxiety time. And let's mitigate that and minimize that, so if you're able to do self-insured, utilizing these techniques of biometrics that we tried to create 20 years ago. Dan Gregory was a guy from Choice Care, brought it all in. Population health management, it was a great idea. We want to do it. The data's there, the software's there today to do this. And there's systems that can do this, but that change scares us all. So I'd say, give us some pearls about why we shouldn't be afraid of self-insuring and utilizing these software programs. Yeah. So those who are thinking, I'm not interested in paying more to the insured carriers because they want more. I want to now begin to manage my population.
There's, first of all, Doctor, thank you for your comments. There's a couple of different solutions you can use as a smaller. Steve described this captive concept. That's an interesting one, and that is you basically have a stop loss limit, that your dollar limit as the employer maybe is $25,000 per employee. Then you have a pooled concept up to $250,000, and then you have your actual stop losses at $250,000. That's much more affordable, and that's a concept. That doesn't fit for everybody, but that's an idea. There's also product that are self-insured products with something like Easy Ag. It looks like a fully insured contract, but it has the principles of self-funding. And that can be done, you know, in a 30, 40, 50 life group. We insure employers as small as like 25 employees, and many of them are in that product. You know, the key difference, and I don't want to be redundant, but you understand the difference between fully insured and self-funded is once you pay your monthly premium in a fully insured environment, it's gone, regardless of what your claims experiences are. And the self-funded is you pay as you go. So the idea is that in the smaller group products, you have the benefits of self-funding that if you get the money, you pay on an aggregate basis only as your premium, and you get the money back. You keep the money because you pay as you go. So there are ways to do this if you want to, But the most important thing from a self-funding viewpoint as employers and company owners, you have to be financially disciplined from a cash flow viewpoint. If you're not, you should be fully insured, because you've got to reserve on an accrual basis and on a cash basis as well. You got to reserve every month as if you're fully insured, but you're paying yourself. You're not paying Anthem or you're not paying United Healthcare. So you got to handle that. Did we answer your question, Doctor? Okay, I'm trying to help you. There are ways to do this, and I think your other comment is that what you're suggesting in a collaborative way is really the true answer to this. The advantage of self-funding is it's very personal, and healthcare is personal. The big carrier model makes it impersonal, and also the point you touched on was the level of customization. You can be very customized. In a fully insured world, or even in a carrier world on an ASO basis, it's box A, B, or C, and please don't deviate from it.
I think one of the issues, for instance, Humana, they have a medical director, they have all this that they tell you they can help you. And I'd say for Vitality, for instance, have they helped you? Did the medical director help you and do all this? And is the answer yes or no? Did the medical director come to? Yeah. So my thinking is, somebody creates a system where you've got that ability. It reduces the anxiety of the employer, i.e., the other lady was saying HIPAA, with all those issues. You create that model, and my gosh, it's an opportunity. That's what I was sort of hoping that somebody's doing and thinking is creating this. So you engage this process in localities again.
You've got to. I understand. It's something we call a narrow network. You basically eliminate the carrier and you work with a local hospital, but you got to be in a unique geographical area. If you have 2 or 3 very strong hospital systems that are equally dominant, it's very difficult to do. If you're in Bill's hometown in Peoria, Illinois, it may be easier because there's only one real hospital to work that way through. But those are concepts that can be done, and some people are thinking, and our company, as an example, is trying to figure out how to do that.
I think you have to think of it as a marathon. It's not a sprint. So you think, well, let's try to do something and let's do it really fast and really quick. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's a multi-year commitment, a multi-year strategy. And a guy in Wisconsin had a company with about 1,000 lives, and he's the owner of the company, and he was getting 15% rate increases. He decided to really go after it and strategize with it. And he got his rate increases down over a 4 or 5 year period to 2.7% over the last 3 years. But he made a commitment and stuck with it, and now his company and his culture have embraced it, and it's a forever strategy and commitment.
Absolutely. Question?
Yeah, just a quick question going back to ACA. A lot of the clients that I'm meeting with are trying to determine that affordability and when an employee can go to the exchange. So if they're offering affordable coverage, can an employee still go out to the exchange, I guess is the question.
An employee can always go to the exchange, but if they have affordable coverage through their employer, they're not eligible for the tax subsidy. But like I said, with the example of an employer offering a somewhat substandard policy, an employee that understands everything, doesn't want to take that risk, they could go to the exchange and get coverage, but they just may not qualify for tax subsidies.
Right. Question? More? I got one for you as an audience. When you think about the word self-insured, does that, to you, mean risk? Yes, it does, doesn't it? And isn't that interesting, because there's stop-loss insurance that prevents the risk from being too far and to manage. But when we talk to people, and we hear it from employers, we talk about self-insurance, which, by the way, the hot new topic on all fronts of healthcare, because fully insured plans are going to pay more taxes, much more taxes, than the self-insured world. It's already decided. It's going to affect what you pay. It doesn't have the same level of tax associated with self-insured. But the risk, the word risk, associated with self-insured means I'm naked. And that is not the case. Jim?
You know, there's risk from that vantage point, but I would offer there's more risk by not having any information.
Yeah, true.
So who's your stop loss on that program? Who's providing the stop loss?
On Active Care?
Yeah, or the one where you were talking up to 25, pool 25 to 250, stop loss above 250.
Oh, okay. Jimmy, why?
Who's the stop
There's a
loss?
variety of carriers that offer those programs.
Okay, so you're working with more than one?
Yeah, there's one or two.
Okay.
What happens once you get a major claim? Something above the stop loss?
The question is if you have a major claim that goes above your spec on an individual basis, what happens? And under those circumstances, the carrier picks up if you have a $50,000 spec, any dollar over $50,000, the carrier picks up. No. No retribution?
Right.
No, there's not. You may, depending, yeah, it depends on your experiences. I mean, if you have a 100 life group and you got one person that's spec, you know, it's not as dangerous as if you had 12 people at spec. But you know, it's all a function of your results. But the same point, and if you're fully insured and you got people, you're having a lot of claims, you're going to get hit in the fully insured world just as much or more as you are going to be in the self-funded world.
In which case you could spec a person out.
If you do it right, you can take that person out, and it helps, as I say, the only people who get screwed are the taxpayers.
Guys are doing good. Good questions. More?
And in a fully insured environment, Jason, would you rather have a 50% rate increase on 100% of the cost of the plan, or even a 50% rate increase on the reinsurance, which might represent 10% of the total cost of the plan?
The cost for reinsurance seems like the way to go, it's just the risk is being dropped and then you go into the claim. But if you're in it, you have to go based on your risk issue, loss issue.
Most of the employers that we've dealt with over the years who have gone self-funded have stayed self-funded forever. I mean, the percentage of employers that stop being self-funded is very, very, very small. So it's very rare. It's possible, and it's occasional, but very small.
More questions? Here we go.
Self-funding for 5 years in a row. I'm sorry. And we are a 150 employee company. We're spread across 5 states. I've lowered my health insurance costs by 20% and added 30 jobs over the course of the last 3 years, primarily through a wellness program. But to this gentleman's point over here, there are 2 things that are not adding up to me. Number one, self-insurance probably isn't available. Fully funded option is not, I'm sorry, self-insured option is really not available to him. He doesn't have the mass number of employees available to pay for all of those additional insurance programs. And we look at this every year for the last 5 years, and there's a critical mass number. You've got to hit about somewhere between 100 and 150 employees in order for it to begin to make economic sense. The confusing part to me is that you seem to be suggesting that through this program, and by the way, we offer an incentive to our employees to get an annual physical, okay? If they choose not to get an annual physical, we charge them $50 more a month on their health plan, period. But I do not get to see what their blood work looks like,
right,
nor do I get to set what an acceptable cholesterol level or an acceptable blood pressure reading is. And you seem to be suggesting, and we get to look at this information. I now have 150 employees who have all taken a physical. We're able to look at the aggregate data, so we know that we have a cholesterol problem in the company. We don't exactly know where the cholesterol problem is, but we know that we have one. So we institute lots of awareness programs about lowering cholesterol. My employees get to walk into work now, and there's an apple sitting at the front desk or at the guard shack when they walk in. We encourage them to do these kinds of things. It's called Fruit of the Month Club. There's a lot of them out there that you can do. It's not that expensive. But the point is, you seem to be suggesting that somehow you're looking at this data not in the aggregate, but on an individual basis. And my understanding and my lawyer's understanding is that you can't do that. You cannot start charging that person who happens to have high cholesterol and still runs 15 miles a week and is on his Lipitor regularly, but can't get his cholesterol in place. You are discriminating against that person. Now, that's my understanding of having worked this for 3 to 4 years. So can you clarify that? Because I think that's what this gentleman was asking. You say, you know, you're saying we can gather this data, you're saying that we can look at it, you're saying that we can individually charge people more if they don't hit those targets. We can say, yes, if you smoke, you're going to pay more. I don't know that I can say, if your cholesterol is not 20 points lower this time next year, you're going to pay more. I just don't know if we can do that. Are you telling me that we can?
No, but let me clarify, and Greg can certainly handle the legal aspect of this. What our programs do is we identify on several characteristics: smoking, blood pressure, glucose, cholesterol, and triglycerides. So you're never picking on, let's say, a smoker, or you're not picking on somebody who has high cholesterol. It's the aggregate score of those 5 elements. We get, as an employer now, for our employees, we get an aggregate report that is de-identified. So I don't know if it's Susie or Joey who has a pass score or a fail score. Now, in every company, there's 2 or 3 employees, generally HR types, who can get this information. So what we say to an employer who's doing this, Susie passes, Joey fails. It's yes, no, it's very binary. Now, if they have a cholesterol issue, or they say they have some type of, that prevents them from getting a passing score, if they get a note from their doctor, then they automatically get the lower contribution. But we do not know on an individual basis what everybody's issues are. It's a very HIPAA-compliant environment.
Except that somebody in payroll has just upped Susie's contribution.
Correct.
Therefore, somebody within the company knows that Susie failed.
Yes.
Yes. That seems to me to be a legal issue.
Well, but you don't know why she failed. You don't know.
But she failed,
Yeah, but you
and
don't-
therefore she may not be as employable as you thought she might once was.
Well, from a disability discrimination lawyer with when I wear that hat, you know, knowing more about people's disabilities is always
Right.
worse.
So Susie gets let go because Susie's not a good employee, and she turns around and sues you because you know that she's paying more for her health care than Sally, who works right next to her.
But that's the entire wellness incentive business. I mean, this act has made wellness programs even more attractive for employers than they were before this act.
Absolutely,
So
it has.
I mean, the federal government is encouraging this kind of activity.
I, as one of the 3 owners of our company, I am not eligible to see that information on an individual basis. All I have is an aggregate report. Now, we have our payroll and our HR individual, the only 2 people who are allowed to see it. And every employer has 2 or 3 designated people who can see the sensitive information. Ownership, generally, if they're smart about this from a legal viewpoint, should not be privy to seeing that information. So if somebody is let go, it should be based on performance basis, not because of what their DNA is.
Steve, I understand that there's an advocacy component to this whole strategy. perhaps you could expand on that a little bit, so people can understand that it's not up to the employer to exactly work with this employee who has a problem. They have a personal health care advocate who has all that information and works with them individually.
Jim, you want to take that?
Well, I don't want to get into a company commercial here. The gentleman allowed us a little bit to say something there, but, our view is that, as I said earlier, healthcare is personal. So you need to be working with people who can help you. What we're really talking about, what Al has mentioned, is that you can have a coach or you can have a health advocate assigned to an individual if they want it, and you as an employer want to offer those programs, and they can spend time with you. The Vitality program and other programs like that are, even if you're doing an annual physical, you do the act, but the real results come by doing something once you get the data and helping them modify their lifestyles. Our view is there's three types of employees. One is somebody who wants to be healthy and he needs the constant validation. The other bucket on the opposite end of the continuum is somebody who wants to have fried chicken and have 12-pack of beer, 12-pack every night. They're never going to change regardless of how hard you hit their pocketbook, so you need to understand that. But the largest majority of your employees would like to be healthier, but they either don't have time, they don't have the resources, or they don't know how to get started. And that's where the advocates and the coaching programs can talk to them about their lifestyle and help them on how to get started. I mean, I'm wearing a pedometer in my pocket every day. If you're only walking 5,000 steps a day, that's a sedentary lifestyle. If you really want to help yourself from a physical and health viewpoint, you need to be walking at least 10,000 steps a day. So there's ways of doing personal touches. Healthcare is personal, and that's why you got to break it down. And again, I'm not trying to be a commercial here for self-funded, but that's really what self-funded can do. It's much more highly integrated, and it can make this whole thing on a more personal versus the traditional carrier model, in our opinion.
One thing too, to the point about the size, doesn't your pooling concept allow smaller people to participate in the self-funded? That's the benefit.
Yes, that's the benefit of the pooling
So where you
concept.
say that it's only targeted to people over 100, pooling allows.
If you have, this gentleman had, 15 employees, that's tough. I mean, we have our smallest group, I think it's self-insured, is roughly about 28 employees because of the pooling concept. And if you got 10 or 15 employees, it hurts me to say this, but you should seriously look at the exchanges. I mean, you got to look at that. It may not be the option for you, but it's an option at least you should investigate and explore.
One of the points of the wellness score is that when people go through it and they get identified, and then they get their goals, 80% of the people within the course of 1 year make their goal. So once people identify what their issues are and then get at it and pursue it, at the end of the year, 80% of those people have achieved the goal. And because that genetic predisposition scenario where somebody has that issue, they have an opportunity for a waiver and not to be. And if somebody has cancer, they're not penalized just because they have cancer. Or if somebody has a heart problem, they're not penalized because they have a heart problem. It's getting people identified. That's one of the keys, is that 7 out of 10 people don't have a doctor. And when you see the stats where 58% of people have unmanaged conditions, and 42% of people, when they go through the wellness screen, find out that they have a issue that they didn't know about. So again, we have a very sick society, and this particular program allows people to get identified, get a score, and then have a goal and be accountable to their goal, but with the waivers for the genetic predispositions.
Just an example, and I'll personalize this. We have a soon-to-be 30-year-old son. We actually married a girl from Cincinnati. But he had blood work done. He just on a lark, he had to have, another reason he had to have it done. Well, he had high cholesterol. Well, he didn't know it now. My wife and I are both on 40 milligrams of cholesterol medicine, so wake up, the gene pool isn't good for him. He tried to go on fish oil and just modify his diet. He couldn't get it done. He's now soon to be 30 years old, but he's on 10 milligrams of cholesterol medicine. Now, he would not have been a claim probably for the next 15 years, just because of the age that he was when it was identified at 28. But he could have been a claim at age 45, but now he's ahead of it. And that's how, when we talk about being strategic, that's how you got to be strategic. Now, I'm not going to say that in our generation, people thought about cradle-to-grave employment forever, you know. But you still, if you really value your human capital and productivity, presenteeism, absenteeism, it means something, you want to get them healthier because they really are your assets. I mean, long term, there's probably only two competitive advantages: speed and your people.
It's from an HR standpoint, so you think of a lot of the HR, in the HR world right now, performance evaluation, right? Years ago, it used to be check the box once a year, right? And it was more of a exercise of, all right, I've got to fill this out, I've got to turn it in, and gets filed away, done, move on. Now you see the strategic and competitive companies, it becomes that development plan, right? So it's a livable, workable document where employees, right, from year over year, where do they want to go within the organization, succession planning. So, you know, the same concept here from a wellness plan. Is it one that they're committed to on that, where it's, again, lifestyle changes are ongoing? Same thing as they, you know, we talked about human capital as they operate within an organization. It is something that they're developing and working with HR and the rest of the executive team to develop themselves. So kind of a parallel there.
Question has to do with kind of waivers. So we're a self-funded plan, and anybody has an option to select for a dollar amount, call it $3,000 or $4,000 to be flexible to go off of our plan onto a spouse's plan or whatever. But in going to the discussion about if there are individuals who may be high claimants and paying, for example, for them to go on to the exchange, my question goes to sort of the legalities of knowing individuals and selecting them and maybe not offering that to the rest of the group. Are you just trying to do that through compensation? Because if it's part of the medical plan, is that kind of in violation of the waiver clause and the amount? So if you could talk to that, because I would presume in most cases the exchange is going to be, let's just say the exchange for sure is more than what you would otherwise pay through any kind of a just waiver program as part of the medical plan.
Yeah, you broke the code. It can't be done through the benefit plan for all the reasons you suggest. It would have to be done as a payroll practice, but there's no reason it can't be done as a payroll practice. But yeah, one of the proposals from one employer group was that they would have a reimbursement account to pay people to go onto the exchange, and their health plan would be a reimbursement account, and the administration shot that down.
Good question. More questions? Yes, sir.
I didn't hear all that last question, but as far as coverage for dependents, and the $2,000 and the $3,000 penalties, is that just based on the employee, or is there a requirement that companies cover dependents?
It's just on the employee. You don't have to provide affordable coverage for dependents. You have to offer essential coverage, or if you're in that under 100 range, that minimum essential coverage for dependents, but you don't have to subsidize it in any way. You just have to offer it, and then so no subsidies required. And spouses are not dependents for this purpose. So you don't have to offer to cover spouses at all.
Last question? Anybody? I'd like to thank this panel for being up here and certainly participating in this forum, and hopefully you enjoyed it. Walked away today with a lot of great information. So with that, gentlemen, thank you very much.